Anyone else? All right. Then we're going to move on to Aunt Marie. And we have Rita right back up here.
Marie Theresa von Borstel Hattrup was born in March of 1931. She passed away after several years of a struggle with MS. She would go in to see a doctor. She went in one day, and she was pretty much, when she was walking with her walker, she was like this, and she was seeing everything on the floor to pick up. And she's walking like this. But she would go everywhere. She had no intention of being in a wheelchair. She went into the doctor. Doctor was not in there when she got in. The nurse got her seated, and there was a wheelchair sitting in the room. When the doctor got through with her, because he was talking about her spinal stenosis, I think, because she had that quite badly too. He looked at her and he said, "Well, can I help you get into your chair?" And she looked at him and she said, "I don't have a chair." And he said, "That wheelchair's not yours?" She said, "No." He said, "How did you get in here?" She said, "I walked." He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. That's who my mother was. She married Ken Hattrup in April of 1951. She became a housekeeper extraordinaire. She could do it all. She was a baker, as everybody would know. And she would bake. One year she baked a lot of pies for the fair and for them to sell at the fair. And a young man came in and he leaned on the glass that was enclosing all of these pies. And he broke it. And it went down and it ruined a couple of the pies. And my mom came out and just really tore him up. You know, Mom can tear you up. Lee's going to tell you how Mom can tear you up. So, but anyway, she tore him up, and he felt so bad, and he didn't have any money to help to pay for it, and he left. And it was a few weeks later, Mom gets this letter delivered to her from the U.S. Post Office, and it says, to Maria, baker of pies. And it got to her. It got to her. And it was this young man who had sent a little bit of money just to help out because he felt so bad about breaking it. And she felt bad because she chewed him up. She could do needlework of any kind. It didn't matter what it was. She could sew. She sewed beautiful clothing. She crocheted. She could knit. She didn't usually do it, but she could. She did everything that way. She would teach herself how to do things. She taught herself woodworking by making me a cedar chest. Yeah, I could bury a horse in it, but it's a cedar chest. I mean, it's huge. I have to always think where I'm going to put it in my house, right? She did that. She built that. She reupholstered our furniture. She cooked for my dad for 60 years, which is probably something I'm not sure I would do. Her garden was absolutely beautiful, and she loved her flowers. And she would be out working in that yard all the time. And she was out on one day setting mold or gopher traps, she called it, gopher traps. And Ted and Jean drove up, and they came in. Ted said, "What are you doing?" And she explained to him about what she was doing, setting these traps for the gophers, and Ted was interested. And then she said, "Well, come on in for lunch." So they did, and Mom was baking rolls. She was making rolls. They were all raising for some event that she was taking rolls to. I'm not sure what it was. And so he asked her about that, and she told him what they were for, and they had lunch, and they left. And the next day, I think it was after church, I think they went to Carol's little diner that she had. And she saw them there. She saw Ted and Jean there. Ted looked up at her. He said, "Aunt Marie, what are you going to do with all those molds?" Well, Mom thought he said rolls. And she said, well, I'll put them in the freezer and we'll have them the next time you come. Ted was wondering what he ate the day before. She raised 3 daughters and a son. And we were not all easy. I was, but nobody else. My father finished his college degree in Seattle after returning from Korea. He was over there. Mom worked to take care of them both and I'm not sure, Ann, you could probably say what it was. She was working for the Federal Reserve, is that correct? And she did pretty much data entry is what she did. And she, my mother was very well known for being strong. Mom did inherit the strong gene. And she would, she'd use it to her advantage anytime she had. And there was a guy that was working with her, and he was always going around. He was young, and he was puffed up, and how strong he was, and he was going to do this, and he wanted to arm wrestle everybody in the place. And finally, Mom said, "I'll arm wrestle you." And so he's like thinking, "Oh, okay, the woman wants to arm wrestle. All right, I'm going to be easy." So they got down, they got in the stance. And they said, start, and Mom did. Boom! She went so fast, he didn't have a chance. So she got her. You never wanted to take her on. Well, let me tell you. They came to farm on land that was given to my mother in Kent. And my father had worked as a hired hand for a while, and he felt that he could make a go of it. It was in 1958, so I was about a year old. And George followed 5 years after that. And George, of course, was named after Uncle George because my father loved Uncle George so much. And Ann came 2 years later, and Heidi came 5 years after that. So we were spaced out pretty well. There were times. And I know them because I was older, and of course, children they listen to everything that's going on. So you always want to keep track of where your kids are when you're breaking apart for whatever reason. But I know we had some tough times. And my father was a pessimist, and my mother was an optimist. That was good, right? And I know times my father was really, really unhappy because he didn't think he was going to be able to support us on the farm. And Mom she'd sit with him and work through it and convince him that he was going to make it and he would be good and he would handle it all. And he did because she believed in him. My parents went to high school together, but my father was 3 years older than my mother, so there was a little bit of age difference there. Mom thought he was a horse's ass, which he pretty much was. And so she went wild about him, but he went away to college, and he came home to a dance at St. Peter's. I asked Dad this. I wanted to know when this all happened. And he said, I went to a St. Peter's dance, and your mother was sitting on the sidelines. And he said she had her hair up in a kerchief like she liked to do. And maybe some of you saw her do that occasionally. And he said, I couldn't take my eyes off of her. And he said, I never wanted another woman again. She was it. She was the love of my life. Which she was for most of us. My father got a lease from Don Martin, who lived he had a ranch anyway out in Morrill. And so we moved to Morrill for that. And of course, moved all of us, but we weren't so far apart that I got to go to high school with everybody I was in grade school with, so that worked out okay. We moved from a shack into a really lovely home that had air conditioning, and Heidi was just a baby at that time. When Heidi was 4 months old, Mom had a pressure cooker blow up, and it burned her from the top of her stomach to her knees. And it was a serious burn. It was a 2nd degree, little of it was 3rd degree. And she had a baby. She had a 4-month-old child, and she could no longer nurse her. But she took Heidi, and they moved in with Grandma until Mom could handle coming back out, and, it was safe for her. And she just stayed there with Heidi for several weeks, and the rest of us stayed on the farm. My mother was an instigator, and a lot of you really don't know that. My mother was the one who set things in motion, and she'd set them, and she knew how to pick her battles in such a way that my father saw the same way and carried it through. And I think a lot of you felt it was my father. It was not. It was my mother. My mother was the instigator. She decided when they moved into the house, the Burkett house, she decided she didn't like the fact that you had to walk through the living room and then through the dining room to get to the kitchen. So she told my dad, I want you to put me a doorway right here so people can go through the office and go in, so we don't drag through the living room. And, okay, we already know, you guys can hear my father, right? I'm not going to do that, Marie! No, not, right? You've all heard it. Every one of you have heard it. Matt actually does it better than I do, but every one of you have heard it. And so he walked out the door, and she got a hammer. And she tore a hole through that wall, and then she left it for him to fix. That's what Mom did. That is my mother. My mother loved bridge. She just tried to teach me, which that was not going to happen. And she did teach Ann and George, I think, or maybe they learned it another way, but they can play, not me. My father liked to, but my mother loved it. She was competitive by nature, which as von Borstels, we know we all have a little bit of that in us. And she loved to go to the fair, to the state fair. She won Queen of the Kitchen at the state fair, I think twice. Ann, am I correct? She won 5 times? No. She won Queen of Home Ec once. She won 5 times?
She won a wonderful sewing machine.
I know she won a sewing machine for Home Ec. She won a stove. She won a dishwasher. Yeah, so that was theirs. Yeah, 1 was Home Ec, I remember that, and 2 were Queen of the Kitchen. And she was good. My mom was good. She knew how to compete. And she would, every year, she did the Wheat League cakes and had that done. Every year she did the Pillsbury competition, and I was so glad that she was still alive when I got to go. That was wonderful. But no matter who won, even if she didn't win, Mom was a great sport. She was happy for whoever did it, and she would try to learn from that person and do a better job the next time. She loved to judge at fairs. My father hated it, but she loved it. And it was her way to get out of the house, go do something fun that she enjoyed, and see things she enjoyed. And my father whined, Marie! You can hear it, right? Every one of you heard it. But she'd go. She said, the hell with it, I'm going. So she did. She really loved nothing more than to chase her nieces and nephews, as you all can remember, chase them like she was going to punch them, like she was being tough, right? And they'd run and get under the bed, and nothing made her happier than that. She loved that. Even when the nephews grew big, she still wanted to go out and fight with you guys. You remember that, don't you? She loved it. She loved to wrestle. She taught all of us in our little family to wrestle. Ann and I used to do it all the time. George used to do it with us all the time. We all loved it. It was fun. Even though my mother was the baby of her family, and I know in a lot of ways she was favored, nothing ever spoiled my mother. My mother was never spoiled by life in any way. She was a lovely human being who would always do more than her share of work and never expected anybody to give more than what they could. Of course, there's a lot of us she expected we could do more, but you know what I'm saying. Carl and Uncle George would, because she was a baby, they'd put her up to doing things. And Mom would do them because she was following her two big brothers. And the big brothers never quite understood that they were going to get in trouble for doing that. And so they'd get spankings, and Mom would get away with all of it. You know, she was a little spoiled in that regard. After retirement, my mom and dad spent quite a bit of time with Shirley and Orville Blaylock. They're very dear to us, and they were wonderful friends to my parents. And they traveled, and they did wonderful things, saw family and friends. My parents got grandchildren late in life. And the only thing my mother said, she wanted to be able to hold them. And it became tough after a little while. But she loved those grandkids, and she and Dad were both so proud of the way they turned out and the kind of human beings they are today. I never knew anyone who didn't love my mother. She remembered everyone's name, and she smiled all the time. She was happy. She believed in community, but she was really good all by herself. She could see the goodness in most things, except when she put a decorated cake in the back of the Scout and protected it nicely with a towel. And my father thought that she was laying down a nice place for him to put his guns. And that's what he did. He put his guns in her decorated cake. I thought she was going to kill him. I thought for sure. The one thing you want to know about my mother, if she asked you for a bite of your apple, you just handed her the apple and went and got another one. Because Ann can explain this better than me. But Ann... She did. She would unhinge her jaw like a snake, wrap it around the apple, and hand you back a quarter of the apple. And want to know why you looked at her like that. So we all learned at a very young age, do not give her a bite of your apple. You know. I know right now that Aunt Rita and Mom are playing bridge. They're eating something with a whole lot of butterfat, and they're laughing.
And that got me collecting antiques. And somewhere between there and my 8th grade year, Marie told me, she says, I've got something for you when you graduate from grade school. And so she told me what it was, but I didn't tell many people. And Joy's graduation from high school was the same night as mine from grade school, and we had a party out at the ranch. Some were watching her open presents. Some were watching me open presents. And I opened a sterling silver set of napkin rings from the Shears Grade Hotel and a creamer and a pitcher, sterling silver that matched. And I looked at Marie and said, thank you. And that had been 5 years or something had been promised. And one of the women at the table said, well, that must be a mix-up. That's Joy's. Boys don't get sterling silver. Yeah, he did. And if you want to see it, it's in the museum now for everybody to see and to enjoy.
You were talking about Aunt Marie being queen of the kitchen. Aunt Marie was queen of the kitchen every time you ate one of her meals. That's just how that worked. She's just wonderful. Wonderful, and it was a treat to get to eat her meals. One little story I remember when I was little, Aunt Marie had taken, what they call it, the icing off of the Christmas tree. They had the little thin strips of, must have been tinfoil. Tinsel, yes. And she had taken each individual piece off of the tree and hung it over the back of the chair. And I was staying with them for whatever reason. And my little hand reached out and just scrunched them. Kitty let into me on that one. Your story, Rita, on how your mom received that letter, how they addressed it, reminded me, but I'm going to need some help. Keith DeCourcy, and I'm assuming when he was just getting to know the family, addressed a letter to the home place and described the dog. And that letter, anybody remember that? Do you remember why the letter? Or?
Well, I just remember that Simon had been the mailman from 1923 until we were kids, and he knew that dog.
He described the dog, and that letter got there.
Okay, Aunt Marie and I did lots of cooking together.
You gotta put it closer.
Okay, is that better? Yes. We did lots of cooking together. And so my senior year, we decided my 4-H project was going to be to make an Indian food cake. So Mom made lovely Indian food cakes. Grandma made lovely Indian food cakes. Aunt Marie made lovely Indian food cakes. Aunt Clara made lovely Indian food cakes. We all decided that I should go with each person and learn to make an Indian food cake with them their way. At the end of that time, I had made a few notes about the differences between one and another and how we made our cakes. So we did that, and Aunt Marie came over, and we changed the recipe. And if you look in the cookbook, there's Grandma's recipe and there's my recipe. And there's other recipes. I know you have one. As long as you have a good recipe, they work. But anyway, we changed the recipe and we had a bulletproof recipe. Lots of people then in that group changed their recipes also. That year, because I was 18, I could go to the county fair and be judged in the adult judging. So Aunt Marie, myself, Aunt Clara, and Mom all entered Indian food cakes. Now we laughed about this. Of course, there's no frosting or anything, it's just the cake. Because virtually they were almost all exactly the same. Well, I won. Aunt Marie came over and she says, I'll be damned. You spend all this time with these kids, teaching them everything you know, and they learn how to do it better. So that's my Indian food cake story with Aunt Marie. And I still love to make Indian food cakes, and that's the reason why. We did lots of Indian food cakes. The other thing was, when Aunt Marie was in the Oregonian several times in a row, being the winner at the state fair, there was always a picture of her. And I could be in Portland at Meyer and Frank's doing some shopping or something, and somebody would come up to me, and it happened several times, different places. Oh, Marie Hattrup. I am so glad that I saw you here in Portland. And they would just go on and on. Finally, I got the point when that happened, I'd just say, oh, thank you so much. But she and I did look enough alike. She was about 15 years older than I was, so we were closer in age than a lot of people in the family. And that's my story.
You know, when we look at those 6 individuals, we were so lucky to have grown up with that generation and all of those people as our aunts and uncles. It was just really special for all of us. But when I look at Aunt Marie, I remember when I married David, his mom's family was the von Borstels. It was a large family, and they were close, like the von Borstels. And I remember describing to one of my siblings one time, all 9 of those siblings. And, okay, going through the 9 and, this person and that person I got to Aunt Patty, and all I had to say is, well, she was the Aunt Marie of the Walkers. And that's all I needed to say. That described Aunt Patty. But when I think of Aunt Marie, as special as all those were, I think that when you look up the word aunt in the dictionary, it says Marie Hattrup. She was very special in my life, and I miss her so much. And I know a lot of us thought that, I spent a lot of time with her, and I really felt like she was my other mother.
I'm not going to be as long-winded as Rita, but maybe almost as much so, because there's so much to tell about Aunt Marie that's fun. When I was a little girl, I called her Annie Reed, not Aunt Marie. And when I was a little girl, I loved her so much. Joy and I were flower girls at her wedding. And I ruined her wedding because when she started walking down the aisle, I broke free and went running after her and went, Annie Reed, wait for me. But some of the stories I love about her is she went to get a clip-on tie for Uncle Kenny for an occasion they had to go to because Kenny did not like ties. And so she was going to get a clip-on tie. And she went to Nordstrom's. And she said, where do I find clip-on ties? And this snooty salesman said, you don't want a clip-on tie. They're tacky. You need a real tie. And Marie says, my husband doesn't like ties. I want a clip-on tie. And he begrudgingly went and got it for her, and she paid him for it. And what did you say, Rita, how she chewed on people? Is that what you said? Yeah. Chewed on people. Then she chewed on that salesman and never went back to Nordstrom's again. And she had a great time with her sister's Christmas trip. And after she got MS, she was, like you said, Rita, she was so strong. They decided she needed a scooter so that she could shop all day with them because it was too much for her to walk. So they got her a scooter. And Mom said every time they got to a curb, Aunt Marie stopped her scooter, got up, picked it up, put it over the curb, and then got back on. And my mother said people would just stare. And on another one of their trips, they were up in their room, and I came in to see them, and I was with a girlfriend, and I went up to the front desk, and I said, could you please tell me where, the von Borstel girls are staying? And he bellered the room number out of the whole hotel. Everybody could hear it. And I was livid because then I thought any idiot could find that room and give them a problem. And I went up to the room and I said, I'm going back downstairs to talk to management. And Mom says, what are you so mad about? And I said, well, they bellered your room number out so everybody could hear it. And I says, now everybody knows where you are and can bother you. And Aunt Marie looked at me and she says, oh, God help the man that would come in and take us on. And and that was Aunt Marie.
All right,
When Uncle Kenny and Aunt Marie still lived on Highway 97, I got dropped off one day for Aunt Marie to babysit me, and I wasn't in school yet. And George was a year ahead of me. He was in school. And I remember Aunt Marie asked me not to go down to the dam. That worried her. And I said, okay. And I didn't. I was a good boy. I was playing there behind the house. And the bus came home, and George got there, and so good, I had somebody to play with. And he said, let's go down to the dam. I said, sounds good. Well, he was older and wiser. I figured it had to be okay. We were down there about 15 minutes, and here comes Aunt Marie over the hill. Oh, God, was she mad. And we got a good enough beating out of that deal. I still, to this day, I don't like going down to that dam.
Mom said she beat her so hard she hurt herself. George, do you like going to the dam or? What you don't remember didn't happen, right?
I remember going to the dam, but I blocked out the part about my mom beating up on us. So, there's a couple of stories about Mom and her pioneer spirit. When I think I was close to graduating high school. Would have been around 1979, and there had been for a little while some drugs coming through, and kids gotten hooked on drugs, which was not uncommon. Highway 97 seemed to be a point that they could get them, and Mom was on the school board, and they had brought up, they said, well, you got to be thinking about letting anybody know if you're going to be gone from your farm. There's some kids that are hooked. If they hear about you're gone, they might go steal some stuff. So Mom says, well, those kids, by God, those kids better not show up on a ranch. I'll shoot them. And, there was supposedly a couple of kids that were at the deal, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're not going to bother them. Anyway, so I moved to California in 1985, and big culture shock from, up here to LA, and lived down there ever since. I've lived in California, but in around 2006, 2007 time period, there was an ongoing drought. And at the same time, they had a lot of environmentalism activism that said, hey, we've got to let a lot of water flow down from the mountains that normally the farmers would use for irrigation, especially in drought years, but they were restricted on their water usage. And there were a lot of farms and what was especially bad was the orchards that were 15, 20 years there, and all the trees died. And it affected thousands of acres in the Central Valley. It was a horrendous thing. And so I was explaining to Mom about this going on. And she says, well, why are the farmers putting up with it? I said, well, what are they going to do? She says they should get their guns and go up to Sacramento and sort that out. So I just always appreciated that, because that mindset, it was the pioneer type stock that built this country. And it's like those poor, I'm sure some of the farmers felt like doing that, but there weren't too many.
My senior year in high school, I got the pleasure of driving wheat truck for Uncle Kenny. So he said, yeah, I like to hire women to drive wheat truck because a couple of things. If it rains in the morning, like they've done harvest for a couple of hours, and it rains at 10 o'clock or something, the men just go hang out because they know they get paid for the day. But the women, they're going to go in the house and work with Aunt Marie. So, if it rained, then Aunt Marie and I are washing windows or making pies or whatever. And that was kind of a fun time for me to see how Marie made things for the fair. and how she could win so many things. And that vehicle that Uncle Kenny fixed with all the racks, so she would make all these cookies and pies and cakes and go from Kent, Oregon to Salem on a hot August day and win all those awards over the people in Willamette Valley that just had to drive 10 minutes or an hour or something. And that always amazed me. But what she taught me is like, oh, you make one huge batch of cookies. These are chocolate chip. This is that kind. This is the pecan. That's, and she could make one batch of cake or cookies or whatever and enter it in many different categories. And then she told me, some of you remember, they still have the wheat league cake recipe. So I'd like to enter it someday with Marie's rules. So I asked her, how do you always win the wheat league thing? And she said, well, who follows the recipe? It says in the fair book you have to follow the recipe. It's that one recipe. She said, I make it taste good. So she'd add whatever things all the other ladies in the county would just use the recipe, but Marie knew how to win. Right, Rita? And you know that rule too. You just, I used that recipe and added, more butter and more of this and that. So she could win that. Someone asked me one day, what's your favorite food memory? And it didn't take me long to remember. I still remember the day. Driving for Uncle Kenny, the women in the county always brought lunch out. And in those days, it wasn't just sandwich or whatever. Well, at least at Marie's house. And it was lunchtime, and Marie came driving out the field, and we sat in the summer fallow. And I don't remember what was for lunch, but I remember the hot lemon meringue pie. It's my favorite food memory ever.
Anyone else? I have one that goes on the food memory. The 4th of July picnics that we would have, what's it called? Cirrhosis Park. The root beer.
Oh, I was just...
The root beer. I can't believe no one mentioned the root beer. It was so good. All of us cousins.
It's silver cooler. You go to the 4th of July and went to the silver cooler.
And I remember going through the line to make sure you would get one, and you'd go back and you'd see all the empty bottles, and you'd be like, oh, there's a little bit left. Because they'd all be empty, but I remember her root beer. And then also, she was always the, aunt or uncle in the family that couldn't say my name right, but it was so lovingly, she'd be like, Shawnee, well, Shawnee. I can't say it right, but I can hear it in my head. But I have great memories of her too. Anyone else?
Okay. So what I would say about Mom that nobody mentioned is she had one quality that was like Grandma Millie, because I remember her telling me that Grandma Millie once said, if you're going to make a mistake, make it fast. And that was my mom. So she would, one day, we used to have the barrel for the, mail to be laid, and she pulls up and screeching, because everything was fast as we could do it. And, rams it into park and opens the door, but she'd actually rammed it into reverse and rolled it back and kind of tore off the door. And that was my mother, as fast as we could get something done and make a mistake. So that was one thing. Everything she did, that's the way we operated. And then the other thing that you may not notice, as she got older, she couldn't go do as much stuff. She was on the computer. And God love her, she'd get on that computer and put pictures together. We know family histories and things. But she then, every once in a while, she'd send me a group photo, and I'd be looking at it, and I'm like, there's something that looks odd, and I don't understand it. She goes, oh yeah, so-and-so wasn't smiling, so I photoshopped another smile on her face. Come on, Mom, can we just have the photo? But that was Mom. She was going to make everyone look good in the photo. We're all going to look great. So anyway, that was one of my favorites of my mom.
My dad's side, the next brother down was my Uncle Clinton. And he got married a little bit later. I was already around when they got married, and I think I was, 3 maybe. And I know that when he was dating my Aunt Jan, she said I would go over to his parents, and all they would talk about is Marie this and Marie that and Marie the other. And she said, I'm thinking, who is this Marie? And, Clint said, well, it's Kenny's wife. And she thought, oh my God, she said, she's doing something to make this happen, right? Because she was jealous, and she was like, how am I going to ever compete? And right? And she said, you know, that built up for a little bit, and then I met your mother. And when I met your mother, I got it. And I never felt that way again. I loved her just like they did. So.
Okay, so I think we will move to more videos, which I know we're excited about.